Hello, this is Raf Alvarado, and welcome to Exploratory Text Analytics. In this video, we're going to look at narrative, concept of narrative, and how it relates to sentiment analysis. So we're going to look at the application of sentiment analysis, which we studied last time, to the study of narrative. So narrative is a really important dimension of textuality. It's an essential feature of some text. You can argue that perhaps all texts have some kind of narrative quality, but it's an essential feature of an important subset of texts, which describes the quality of a text to tell a story, to more sort of concretely, to provide a sequence of events over time, to represent a sequence of events over time that in some sense tell about human behavior, the unfolding of actions over time, and the consequences they lead to. We can think of narrative as a reduced representation of human behavior, much in the same way that in data science and in mathematics, a lot of what we do is we try to take complexity, some very large set of facts and information, and we try to reduce it to something essential. There are lots of human representations that do this. We can think of maps as one thing that takes, a sense of the terrain of the world or of some part of the world and reduces it to something that you can hold in your hand. In a very similar way, narrative is a reduced representation of human behavior, social action, or life, time in general. Another important dimension that we want to sort of emphasize here when we're studying, say, literature, is that every novel in its representation of a story of human action really is a kind of theory of human behavior. Because when you write a story, what you're doing is you are, in a way, creating an agent-based simulation. You have characters and you ascribe traits to them, and you then demonstrate how these traits and characters interact over time and produce a kind of situation or a set of situations and an outcome. Now, we know that in such representations, the people are fictitious very often. In a typical novel, so we're looking at Jane Austen's Persuasion, and Eliot, it didn't exist. But her values, her way of thinking, the language that she's using, the emotions that she's expressing, the situations that she has entered into, such as not being able to inherit property, those things govern the logic of her behavior, and those things are real. I have here written, they express the author's worldview, but they also express the author's world, the actual world in which Jane Austen lived and about which she is writing to her contemporaries. So we can go back to Aristotle's Poetics, which is really which presents a theory of tragedy, but which is really a general theory of drama. And Aristotle was the first to point out that an important dimension to a drama is this notion of the plot. And he isolated it as one of a handful of essential elements of a drama. And a plot for him was really the most important thing about a drama. It was the soul of the story of the play, and it really, for him, was a form of imitation. When you tell a story or represent human behavior in narrative form, you are imitating social action. And imitation is a very powerful word in this context. Is what it means is it means it opens up the possibility of representational authenticity. In other words, some kind of truth, which is what I was talking about in the previous slide. So here is Aristotle's basic model of a plot of a drama, a tragic drama in particular. And in the text, we're not reading Aristotle's Poetics, but hopefully you've heard of it. He deals with, as an example, Sophocles as Oedipus the king. And here you see that there is an initial incident that incites the occasion. So Sophocles, or Oedipus, realizes the kingdom, there's something wrong in the kingdom. He wants to figure out what's going on. So he searches and searches and searches until something happens. And the story then changes its fate, and then these other things happen. And his argument was that in a story, what a story is trying to accomplish, what the narrative quality of a story is, the fact that it has a particular sequence, is trying to achieve and provoke a psychological effect on the audience. In this case, it's the effect of having people recognize something tragic in life, and pity and fear become the emotions that emerge, and then there's a kind of catharsis. So that's Aristotle's theory of tragedy, and it doesn't apply to all narratives, but all narratives presumably have a kind of arc like this of some shape. So Vonnegut argues that, he generalizes Aristotle and kind of makes it more comparative, introducing other kinds of stories. And the basic idea is that stories have shapes that can be drawn on graph paper. And in fact, he draws a few on the chalkboard. It's interesting because Kurt Vonnegut, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a novelist. He's now deceased, but he was an anthropologist. He studied anthropology at the University of Chicago. And proposed this idea that stories have shapes, and that these shapes are as culturally variant as, say, arrowheads or spearheads. He didn't get permission to pursue that dissertation, and probably to the benefit of society, because he became a great writer. But it became the motivation for Matt Jocker's work on narrative that we're going to look at in more detail. So looking at Vonnegut's theory, this is a kind of a whimsical, but essentially fundamentally sound idea. He looks at different kinds of stories. His first one is called a man in the hole story, where someone starts off okay, and then they get in trouble, and then they get out of it again. That's a very common kind of story, and accounts for a huge percentage of the number of stories that are out there. Then there's the boy meets girl story. That he describes in the video as well. And then there's the Cinderella narrative, which gets a little more complexity there. He's got a little stair-step action for how Cinderella is helped by the godmother and that sort of thing. And then there's a little joke here of Kafka's stories, which just go from bad to worse, which is kind of funny. So a key idea that I want to point out here that might not be obvious is that both Aristotle and Vonnegut underline the relationship between narrative and what we can broadly call destiny. So Vonnegut specifically talks about fortune. And fortune is a synonym for what I'm calling destiny. So destiny is a really important, it's a central concept in the study of culture. In a certain sense, you can think of destiny almost as the most central idea that any culture can possess, because destiny, which in itself is a theory of destiny. So I don't have an even more general term to use, but you'll see what I'm talking about when I give these other examples. Destiny is a concept that relates to our understanding, not just of how the world is organized. It's our understanding of how the world happens, how things happen in the world, how life happens. Very fundamental concept. And different cultures have different ideas about how things happen in the world and why they happen. I have a couple listed down here, but just to take an example from contemporary culture, many of us believe, those of us who are secular, for example, that the world is governed by randomness. We believe that chance is the governing concept in the universe. Others, fundamentalist Christians, perhaps Muslims, believe that the universe is not governed by chance, but that God controls the universe. And there are concepts like grace or providence that are designed to inform us about this concept of what I'm calling destiny. Still, other societies will believe in things or have beliefs in things like luck or fate, doom, kind of a medieval notion. I have history listed here because I consider, for example, the Marxist theory of history to be in this category of a theory of destiny. The idea that, there's a class struggle and that results in eventually in the creation of a stateless society. That's a theory of history. That's a theory of the unfolding of events in time, and it's based on the German philosopher Hegel's earlier theory of dialectic.